Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this IFAD Consultate Open Forum. And I know you're all joining in from so many different places around the world, and we're so grateful to have you here today. So this consultation was organized by the Istituto Affari Internazionali, that's IAI, as well as the Southern Voice Network and the members of the European think tanks groups. They organized this open consultation forum for IFAD's running candidates ahead of the special session of the Governing Council for the appointment of the President of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, which you all know is IFAD. The overall aim of the consultation is to bring increased transparency and accountability to the selection process of IFAD leadership, taking on board representatives from IFAD member states, civil society organizations, farmers organizations, indigenous group organizations, academia, development cooperation practitioners, both from the global north and the south, who are all represented here today. And we're so glad to have everyone. So joining us today, we're going to have 3 candidates for presidency. That will be Mr. Alvaro Lario, who's the official candidate from the Kingdom of Spain, Mr. Khalid A. Mahdi, who's the official candidate from the state of Kuwait. Ms. Rachel Awo Omamu is unfortunately not able to join us. She's the official candidate from the Republic of Kenya, but we will also have Mr. Shobhana Kumar Patanayak, the official candidate from the Republic of India. Thank you so much for making the time to come and share your thoughts with us. We also will be joined by keynote speakers from some of the organizations who are quite interested in what IFAD will be doing and what the leadership has planned ahead. Our keynote address will come from Ms. Esther Penunia, Secretary General of the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development, that's AFA, Ms. Gerda Verbeck, a coordinator for Scaling Up Nutrition movement. And we have representatives from our organizing institution who you'll find seated up there in front for you. That's Mr. Fabrizio Botti from the Istituto Affari Internazionali, as well as Daniel Fatibenu from European think tanks groups, and Tracy Morman from the Southern Voice. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we're hoping to have fruitful discussions from this. So in addition to the discussions that we're having here today, we'll also be taking your questions on Slido, and we'll also have polls that we'll have on Slido. Throughout the program, we'll have 2 polls that we have on Slido. In order to participate in these, we ask that you go to the Slido website, which is slido.com, or you can also just download the app for free. And once you have that, the app, or you're on the website, you type in the following code. That's 199493. I will repeat 199493, and we'll add this to the chat for you. You can also scan the QR code. Once you have done that, you'll be able to access the Slido page, and you'll be able to take part in the questions that we have for you. So our first poll question, which I'll just give out to you, is now, and halfway through the show, we'll be able to give you the results from that. So the first poll question is, which should be the main priorities for IFAD? Supporting smallholder farmers and rural communities, boost private investments on sustainable agriculture, protect biodiversity and support projects on climate change mitigation, empower the most vulnerable groups like indigenous people. The question will be found on Slido, so feel free to just go on that website and vote on what you think should be the most important priorities for IFAD. And we have a jam-packed schedule, so we're going to jump in and ask our keynote speakers to start the discussion off. Our keynote speakers will have 10 minutes to speak, and unfortunately, because we have such a tight schedule, I will have to jump in after 10 minutes and interrupt so that we can move on to the next part of our discussion. So just to start us off, I am going to call on Ms. Esther Penunia. Please take to the floor.
Good evening, everyone from Manila, Philippines, and good afternoon to friends from Europe, and good morning to friends and colleagues if you are in the America. We are very honored to speak before you today. This is the first time that we are able to address the candidates for the next IFAD president. With this, we feel included, not in the selection and decision, of course, but in the process of understanding the realities and potentials of a key constituency that IFAD is mandated to target its services for. The rural people, the majority of whom are family farmers, men, women, youth engaged in crops, livestock, fisheries, horticulture, forestry, herding, and pastoralism. And for us, we always grab this opportunity to speak and dialogue with IFAD's leaders and management staff, as we view IFAD as one of our strongest allies amongst UN agencies in our common work to eradicate hunger and poverty, improve health and nutrition, and improve the living conditions of poor rural people. The situation of small-scale farmers at present is at a very precarious stage. All crisis befalling the planet is adversely affecting our constituency. The current Russia war with Ukraine, for example, has driven fuel prices so high, double the prices just several months ago. And with high fuel prices came high prices of basic commodities, food, fertilizer, other agriculture inputs, electricity, water, transport fares. This is happening at a time when we have not recovered fully from the impact of COVID-19, which has already increased prices of inputs and commodities while maintaining the same low farm gate price of our products. And this is happening with climate change always there, making its presence felt. Like in the past several months, now we feel longer hot season and hotter weathers, affecting our yields and therefore our incomes and affecting our health as well. The dialogues that happened as part of the food system processes has acknowledged that the current highly industrialized and big business dominated food system is very much broken, resulting to poverty, hunger, malnutrition to 1.4 billion people, mostly small-scale food producers and family farmers. It is a system that results to biodiversity loss, ecosystem degradation, and where the youth is unattracted to farming. So these challenges are complex, and for this, we have forwarded to many international gatherings, including the ones organized by IFAD before, the following solutions. Policies that incentivize family farmers to shift to sustainable agroecological approaches, reforestation and land restoration, promotion of community-based seed systems, including the inclusion of sustainable and agroecological approaches in agriculture universities, support for participatory agriculture research and innovation, focus on small-scale family farming, promotion of neglected and underutilized food crops but are highly resilient and nutritious, support for training of farmer master trainers and in situ model farms, easy access and affordable credits for production, provision of agriculture crop insurance, training on disaster risk reduction and management, decentralized process, as well as lower fees for organic certification and recognition of farmers as also scientists. In terms of processing, marketing, and distribution, policies and programs to incentivize farmers to organize into cooperatives, providing full value chain services to our members, and using sustainable processing practices. Why did I mention this? Because we know that IFAD, through your investments, portfolio, grants, and loans, and as we consider you as a strong ally of farmers organizations, we hope that this will be promoted through your portfolio loans and grants. We consider IFAD as a strong ally of farmers organizations, and this is with some good basis. For example, IFAD houses and provides support to International Land Coalition, which is the largest coalition of organizations promoting people-centered land governance, of which AFA is a member. For more than a decade, IFAD has entered into partnership agreements with farmers' organizations in Asia Pacific, Africa, and Latin America since 2010. In Asia Pacific, we have called it first the Medium-Term Cooperation Program Phase 1, then Phase 2, and now the Asia Pacific Farmers Program and Farmers Organizations for Asia with the support of the European Union through IFAD. And this is a program being implemented in 17 countries in the region, aiming to build capacities of farmers' organizations to deliver economic services to our members and engage in policy work with our governments. And this partnership agreement was made possible because of the regular Farmers Forum processes, which started in 2006, and the last one was conducted in 2020, just before COVID came. So we take this opportunity to ask the future IFAD president to focus investments of IFAD and prioritize the investments on family farming agriculture, investing in agroecological approaches in production, processing, marketing, distribution with family farming organizations and cooperatives as one of your direct partners, and encouraging the governments to partner with us in the many portfolio that you have in our countries. We also ask you to be more inclusive in the governance processes of your funding facilities. We have this opportunity right now with ASAP 3, which is for climate change resilience. So we hope that you could push through with inclusive governance processes and providing seats in the advisory boards or management structures of IFAD, of the IFAD itself. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for your attention. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Esther Penunia. You've given our candidates so much to think about, and I'll turn the floor to Ms. Gerda Verbeek.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, especially the candidates. I would like to congratulate you, first of all, because you are running for the important position of President of IFAD. And it will be a marathon. So whoever will be elected, you need to be ready for a tough run, maybe even an ultra marathon. Good luck to each and everyone. And I would like to thank IFAD and all the other organizations, organizers for organizing this event. Having said this, I would like to raise 3 topics. One is on the what, in our view, as scaling up nutrition movement active in 65 member countries. What should be on the agenda? I would like to focus on the how. I hope that the next IFAD president and IFAD as a whole will operate. And I would like to address the with whom. How to use your network and your relationships. So first of all, the what. Since we see crisis building upon crisis, the normal climate shocks already, the conflict shocks, but also the huge impact of COVID on food and nutrition security, we have on top of it the impact of the Russian war in Ukraine. And instead of focusing more right now on the calories, on the food security part, and on food imports and on food subsidizing, we hope that a new president of IFAD will lead in such a way that countries are encouraged and enabled to scale up and speed up their food systems pathways. Already 160 countries have developed or are developing a food systems pathway to transition their agri-food, but also their food value chain, including towards consumption, in such a way that it is serving people, it's producing healthy and nutritious and safe food. It is biodiverse, it is respecting the natural resources, so it's also nourishing our planet, and at the same time it is meant to create prosperity. Starting the food value chain close to where food is produced is the best way to prevent food losses, and that's also an important target of IFAD. So I would like to hear from each of the candidates how they are ready to support countries in gearing up the implementation of their food systems pathways, using indeed, as Stella was already telling, making also use of the local wisdom of indigenous and smallholder farmers and crops that are neglected too much, while they have a very good part of nutrition and health within them. The second point is on the how to do this. Well, I think continuing what IFAD is doing, but having a stronger focus on equal tenure to land, forest, fishery, water, etc., is of crucial importance. Too often farmers are discriminated by local or by national groups and other interests. But it is especially the case for women. Too often women farmers do not have access to land, do not have the right to own land. They don't have access to services, financial services, outreach services, and they very often do not have access to technology. So I would like the candidates also to refer to this and how they want to challenge or to make sure that there is equal right and equal access. Then I would like to emphasize youth, because in many countries, young farmers, young children, young people are not attracted to become a farmer. It is creating poverty, it's back-breaking, it's heavy work, and the income is very uncertain and very often too low. And I think there is something to be done. In populist speak, you would say how to make farming sexy again. But the most important is that farmers have access, that farmers are supported, that farmers are rewarded for their contribution to maintaining biodiversity, to their ecosystem services, if you want. And the other part is that I would like you to pay attention to building the food value chain. As I said, the best prevention of food losses is to start the processing of food close to where it is produced. And very often it is able to create jobs that can make young people attracted to stay close to where they were born. Last point on this item is that you can see many initiatives. Everybody wants to save the world and make sure that no one is hungry or malnourished, but at the same time the approaches are too siloed. So please tell us how you would like to avoid working in silos and combine the different players for one action aligning behind a government, because a government needs to be responsible and accountable to their people to make sure that the food system is serving the people and not only the economy. Then finally, with whom? And there, of course, you have a network of partners, but let me start in Rome. How do you foresee the collaboration with FAO, with WFP, and jointly vis-à-vis the food systems hub that is coordinating the actions at country level, but at the same time, the global alliances? I'm also curious to hear from you how you observe your contribution and collaboration in this multi-stakeholder platform and intergovernmental platform, the Committee on World Food Security. And there is reason to step up from the side from IFAD, because from time to time IFAD is missed in the work, in the tremendous important work of the Committee on World Food Security. Of course, I am curious how you would like to work with the Scaling Up Nutrition movement as one of the 5 UN members that are the UN network for Sun in the Sun movement. But I also would like to hear whether you are familiar with farmer field schools, these schools in fields where the teachers are coming to the farmers, be it female farmers or men farmers or indigenous food producers, and where farmers can be trained on the spot. Right now they are FAO farmer field schools, but I could imagine that it will be FAO IFAD farmer field schools, and it's one of the best instruments, from my perspective, that you can use. I have also read a nice paper coming from the so-called FARM initiative. It's the Food and Agriculture Resilience Mission, and it's an instrument where IFAD has supported to do 3 things. Increase the local production, implement the capital commitment and coordination, and making sure that farmers, but also other people's consumers have access to healthy, nutritious, affordable and available food. Then I think, especially for Africa, it is important to see how you look at the relation with CAADP, and for Asia and other regions, how you will work with the regional IFIs, financial institutions, but also the socioeconomic institutions. And last but not least, there is an SDG advocacy, SDG2 advocacy hub that is organizing chefs, but is also a strong advocacy on all parts of the food systems. And in this case, I would like to mention one more thing, and then I'm done, Madam Moderator. Many countries have big problems when it comes to their potential to invest. They have high debt. And I think the president of IFAD and IFAD as a whole has an important role to play there, on making the special drawing rights much more focused on the needs of countries, or to think about debt swaps, for instance, debt swaps for food and nutrition security. And with this, I'm looking forward to a very attractive and interactive conversation, and may the best win and become the next president of IFAD. Thank you so much, Madam Moderator, and all participants, and all the best for you candidates. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gerda. A lot of questions there for the candidates about how you will interact with different groups, as well as how you plan on making farming sexy again. That'll be quite interesting to hear. At this point, we're going to turn to the panelists, who I know everyone is waiting to hear from. In this session, we're going to ask you 3 questions. You'll have 5 minutes to respond to each question. Thereafter, we'll open the floor up for comments as well as questions from the audience. But we'll start off with the 3 questions that we have for you. Question number 1, which I will then address to each of the candidates, is: how would you lead IFAD to consolidate its role as a key institution to foster a sustainable food systems transition? And what role would the private sector play in this? I'm sure this is one of the things that Gerda did raise. And just to kick us off, I am going to turn the floor to Mr. Alvaro Lario. Mr. Alvaro Lario, that's the question for you.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with all of you today, and it's great to be able to engage with so many partners from so many different parts of life. So we have seen that shock after shock, like many of the participants have mentioned, the poor, rural, vulnerable, and marginalized communities, women, children, indigenous people, and poor men are hit hardest and disproportionately so. So IFAD's DNA is to build resilient food systems, and it is what we have been striving for the last 40 years. That is to achieve SDG 2.3, doubling the income of small farm holders under productivity, as well as SDG 2.4, building resilient food systems. My vision for IFAD is actually an institution that is at the center of food systems, the global climate agenda, and global architecture. For this, we need to mobilize smart and private capital to really build sustainable food systems, to create jobs, eliminate hunger, protect nature, tackle climate change and the current economic deceleration. So for all of these challenges that the participants have mentioned, I think it's very clear that IFAD is at the center and is a very important institution with a critical mission to achieve the Agenda 2030. The current food crisis also shows that we're missing the long-term investment in resilience at the local level. And Gerda was also mentioning local production and farm very clearly, and local resilient agricultural practices. In addition, we also know that vulnerable and marginalized populations are often overlooked by policymakers. That is why also IFAD's role, promotion as a champion of rural communities will be key. IFAD's expertise in areas such as value chain development, the provision of last mile soft agriculture investments that complement the large infrastructure from other IFIs, which we can talk about, climate change adaptation for small farm holders, farmers' resilience and family farming, or cross-cutting themes such as youth, gender, nutrition. They're all highly relevant to the strategic priorities of IFAD. Indeed, in terms of policy, which is a very important part, IFAD, when we just completed our 12th replenishment, one of the key messages highlighted the stronger policy engagement and strategic partnerships that will need to underpin IFAD's efforts going forward. A high-performing and inclusive food systems is critical to achieve the SDGs, and the current food systems, unfortunately, incentivize many unsustainable choices. I mean, we as an outcome of the Food System Summit, we also learned that indeed there's around 12 trillion of hidden social, economic, and environmental costs, and they disproportionately affect the most vulnerable. So the challenges are huge, and we need to revert many of them, where it's a prioritization of the volume over the nutritional value or the sustainability, the inability of small farm holders to receive a decent and living wage, also treating natural environment as an infinite resource. We should really make sure that we treat it as, and we care about it. So the upside indeed is huge, and the transformation can bring lots of benefits and gains in terms of health and nutrition, to end hunger for the 800 million of people, to reduce the disease of unhealthy diets, to drive economic growth and inclusive prosperity, create tens of millions of jobs, also with the private sector, which I will talk a little bit on, boost the income for the bottom 20%. I think that's very key for IFAD, and regenerate nature and tackle climate change, protecting biodiversity, reversing deforestation, scaling consumption of sustainable aquatic protein, or restoring soil health. So a successful transformation could indeed bring significant returns and also new business opportunities, where it's tackling food loss, creating new value chains for regenerative agriculture, or shifting healthy diets. So as candidate to the presidency of a UN agency and also a DFI, I question myself, how can IFAD play a role in supporting the creation of an environment that actually creates a catalytic role in scaling up all of these investments? And over the last years, we have put together some innovative solutions. One has been the private sector window. Another one has been the 2 AA+ credit ratings, which have enabled to mobilize private sector resources. 3 weeks ago, we issued a bond to a Swedish pension fund. 1 week ago, we issued another bond to a Japanese investor pension fund. So actually, that's a way of mobilizing resources towards SDG 2.3, 2.4. So I think financial investments are a way to improve food systems, and they can come from many angles: public, private, multilateral. And IFAD needs to be at the key player in coordinating many of this. Gerda also mentioned SDRs. Indeed, the special drawing rights, I have been working with the IMF and the World Bank over the last 6 months. We have asked the IMF to increase the number of topics that whereby the Resilience Trust Fund can invest. Up to now, it's mostly only health and climate, and we have asked for food security. For the time being, we have not been able to push it forward. We have worked with civil society organizations in Washington. Perhaps some of you are there, but I think it's important that we actually mobilize the billions that are there in terms of SDR from the richer countries to the poor countries.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lario. at this point, same question to Mr. Mahdi. How would you lead IFAD to consolidate its role as a key institution to foster a sustainable food systems transition? And what role will the private sector play in all this? Mr. Mahdi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, my dear. Honestly, I just need to make a quick remark and a comment. As being part of civil societies in my country, and I've been engaged in many civil society engagement and talks. So I would like to thank you for bringing forward this very interesting forum to put people all together with respect to our IFAD candidacy. And let me just touch on your point with regard to what is being said by Gerda and what is said by Estrella. Both of them, they focus on capacity building. Both of them, they were focusing about the crisis. Needless to talk about this, we talked about this many times. My dear Alvaro, actually, he mentioned it very nicely at that financial structure and financial architecture that is already IFAD. They have it, and they have a lot of good program to proceed with. Now, let me touch on what is missing at the ground level. What we care for are the beneficiaries. Who are the beneficiaries? Smallholder farmers, farmers, family farmer, community of farmers. All of these are our main focus. They are the target of our mission. We need to protect them, let them grow, let them develop, let them be independent. That's the key word. We want to create farmers who are independent. Family farmers, smallholders who are independent. This community need to be at the level of independence. And how do you make them independent? This is what I call the billion-dollar question. It's not an easy job. However, we do have an excellent engine in IFAD that needs to be simply led and directed toward three major issues. Number one, regarding the policy dialogue. It's been already mentioned, civil society need to be part of this policy dialogue, and that's what I mentioned many times, that visibility of IFAD has been missing in many food community forums. This is need to be part, heavily engaged, and having the civil society to speak out on what they believe. They are working with the people on the ground. We need to listen to them. That's what I call expanding the policy dialogue with respect to the food system across the world. At the end of the day, we have multiple crises that the whole globe has been facing, and we need to listen to the people on the ground and the beneficiary of our services. That's number one. The second one is to build their capacity. Building their capacity, whether using FFS, which is the system is being mentioned by Gerda, which was initiated in Indonesia, I believe, and it's by FAO. This is a very important. I'm very happy that she mentioned it because I'm a very supportive to that type of approach in the field. I add to it a scholarship program that I'm working on building capacity on food security. This is a very important. I'm very glad it's been mentioned. Making it sexy is meaning that you need to attach it to something called incentive. You need to build incentive. How do you build incentive? Is it through the third one, which is how do you look at the farmers, smallholders, family, community as micro enterprises. When you look at them as micro enterprises, in order to make farming as a incentivize, this is what we need to work toward through the private sector engagement or the private sector program, which has already been initiated in IFAD. So you get the private sector engaged for the benefit of these micro enterprise, the smallholders, as well as the family farmer from one side. At the same time, you create for them what I call a platform, that platform or that flagship project or flagship program to get them in. If we look at the future generation, not my generation, and maybe the generation of my grandchildren, you talk about the Gen B, the Gen Z, these are very specific type of mentality they have, and we need to address them. In order for them to move to even to farming, even in poor countries or low-income countries or maybe native, they need also to be addressed through what I say, make the farming, quote unquote, I would say lucrative. How? Is by introducing technology in the game. And this is where can technology help in what I call pushing for getting the farming sexier and at the same time getting the private sector engaged. So it's a win-win situation. As an IFAD president, I will work on these 3 points that the one I mentioned, working with the beneficiary on the ground, working with these specific items in order to build their capacity, encouraging the farmers to encourage their generation in order to reach the level of independence. It will be a pity that I, as IFAD, finance the first generation and I come later to finance the second generation. This is considered a very important KPI for our for any candidate, honestly, me or any other, anyone should stay in this position, should understand when you finance the first generation, you make sure that the second generation is independent and that independent will start to grow.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahdi. At this point, we'll turn to Mr. Patanaik and we'll ask the same question. How would you lead IFAD to consolidate its role as a key institution to foster sustainable food system transition? And what role will the private sector play in this? Mr. Patanaik?
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator, for giving me the floor. I'm greatly enthused by the talk given by Madam Estrella and Madam Gerda. And for both the perspectives were extremely enlightening for me as well. Having said that, I'm also equally influenced by the answers provided by my friend from Rome as well as from Kuwait. I can only say that we have little less than 8 years to reach the SDG goal 1 and 2. And this is too short a period. So we have to double our efforts in order to reach the target. Having said that, we know that the sustainable food system depends on a large number of factors. First and foremost, IFAD is the only organization which can perhaps address this issue in a very holistic manner. It has an experience of close to 40 years of having handled poverty and malnutrition as well as hunger. It has assisted many countries for which they have moved from low-income countries to what they are middle-income countries. And many of the MICs have also graduated to become UMICs. And some of them are not eligible for any loan, but they're eligible for other things. So that means there is a ready-made recipe which is available with IFAD. So I would like to first and foremost concentrate on IFAD as a knowledge bank to transfer the good practices and knowledge that is happening all around the world to the countries which need them most. This would be my first priority in order to have a sustainable food systems. Secondly, I would say that the financial sustainability of IFAD is very important. The replenishment contributions are limited. They hover around $1 billion for the 3-year period. So I would like to also have innovative sources of funding like co-financing from other multilateral development banks, from the regional development banks, and so many other new banks which have come of late, which were not there several years back. Apart from that, borrowing is a very important instrument. Of course, my colleagues have mentioned about borrowing from the private market, but first I would like to exhaust with the borrowings which are available from sovereign governments. We have really not knocked on the doors of each and every sovereign government. We must widen the scope of getting replenishment even from list C countries. Then only we can first of all improve our resources and can lend it to countries which need it most. If today agriculture has to be sustainable, it has to be innovative, it has to work in partnership with many other stakeholders. And they include not only the national governments, but also the CGIAR system institutions, the various banks, the various other stakeholders, the NGOs, the CSOs, and so on. Insofar as private sector is concerned, I can only say that agriculture is in the private sectors. All the farmers are in the private sector. So if at all agriculture has to develop, it has to be done in close association with the private sector. It can be investment from the national governments alone, or only from sovereign resources. The private sector has evolved over time. Today, technology is a big influencer and it changes the life of individuals. We in India have done this in a very big way. Of late, we have employed technology to give access to finance, access to information, access to inputs, and access to markets. So today in India, I can give the example from India, we have close to 1.3 billion people, but we have phones, mobile phones to the extent of 1 billion, and 600 million people have access to smartphones. And that includes majority of our farming community. So today, the farmer does not have to go to a bank, the brick and mortar bank. He just uses a mobile phone and access the finances through his mobile phone. The same is true of getting meteorological information. The same is true of getting prices of commodities raining in the nearest market. The same thing is true for renting out machinery from the private sector, because he doesn't have to own anything now. Everything is like the private sector has a great opportunity, and we must utilize this opportunity through the use of technology, especially digital technology, to provide them the required space and transform the life of the farmer. Thank you, madam.
Thank you so much. At this point we will go on to the next question. How will IFAD foster a sustainable food systems transition, especially for smallholder farmers and vulnerable communities under your leadership? Mr. Lario, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And I'll try to link some of the answers also to the private sector that I did not conclude, because indeed, I would like to speak mostly about youth, about gender, indigenous people, and other communities that actually IFAD is serving. So in terms of the private sector, I think there's an incredible opportunity for job creation, especially we're seeing in sub-Saharan Africa a rapid population growth, and more than half of the people are under 25 years old. So actually we need to find solutions to avoid forced migration and create opportunities on the ground, especially for young rural farmers in the hidden middle segment, what that is. And I think it was alluded by some of the speakers, the processing, the logistics, the wholesale of the agri-value chains and the family farming activities. And how can we do it? Well, basically making off-farm value addition segments of the food value chains accessible for the communities, and making also what one of the speakers was mentioning, sexy. And I think that's part of what the projects of IFAD are trying to do. That means giving them the capacity building, seeing it as a business, not only just working themselves, but as a business that can grow, and also using it and using technology means. I mean, if we can really expand the range of options open to the rural youth to earn decent livelihoods and enable them to diversify their incomes, that can clearly create vibrant and transform the rural economies. And this opportunity, as I said, can be also linked to the digital revolution and to digital approaches that can fundamentally change how the extension services are provided and accessed. Mr. Patanayak was mentioning the presence of cell phones that can also be leveraged as an entry point for rural people to access financial services, get credit scores, and so on. So to finalize on the food system creation and transformation, I would say that we need to collectively take the responsibility for building the resilient food systems, both at the country level and globally. We have been discussing food systems for the last 1-2 decades, and now it is the time to act. There is a group of global movement of food system activists, citizens, many of you, civil society organizations, entrepreneurs that are ready to take action. And I think that the high-performing and equitable food systems is within reach. Let me shift for the next 3 minutes into women, indigenous people. As I said, I think youth and job creation is a fundamental lever for IFAD and for its goal. In terms of women, securing sustainable food systems will only be possible if women are empowered and their rights are recognized and respected. We know that many times they do not have the decision-making power and also the assets, the financial independence to tackle household malnutrition and food insecurity. And throughout my visits globally to many of the projects, has been very gratifying to see how the role of these rural women is truly transformed when they're able to lead and to contribute to the family and the household income. So I am proposing to actually increase the share of gender transformative projects, not only being a checkbox, but actually transforming the role of the women in society. And indeed, many times, environmental degradation and climate change have particularly impacted them, women and children. And many of them, as we all know, they have less control and ownership of land and also livestock. So that also has a big burden on their lives. Also, even the burden of energy poverty also is quite interesting. It has had also a major impact. And as we know, unfortunately, using combustible fuels has also had a major, I would say, impact in their daily lives of women and both of girls. Perhaps to finalize, just say that it should be at the forefront of IFAD to promote this economic empowerment of rural women, to enable women and men to have equal voice and influence in rural organizations, and also to achieve a more equitable balance in workloads, which I think is key also for women empowerment. Finally, on indigenous people, by nature, IFAD's business and projects being inclusive, being community-driven, are really put indigenous people at the center. Many times, indigenous people have a small part of the surface area, but they safeguard 80% of the world's biodiversity, so they are fundamental if we want to also protect the environment. And they basically are the stewards of natural resources and biodiversity. So in that sense, I think we have to continue supporting and promoting their diversity, because it's not a collective that we have more than 5,000 different indigenous groups, and each of them has different needs. So it's very important just to how we approach them from a community development level, from a participatory approach, and make sure that we give them a voice in many of the projects that they are partnering with, as also as a broker of peace and a transmitter of knowledge and culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lario. Mr. Madi, you have the floor once again.
Let me get you the answer of what I believe on how to create sustainable food system where IFAD can support. Now, when I say food system, it does not mean it's only IFAD responsibility. There are many UN organizations also responsible, needless to say, FAO and others who are really into that food system architecture. Now, what I proposed in my candidacy, a project called Agro Platform. It is a true creation of a platform that consists of 7 components. Let me count the 7 components. One of them is supply chain management that connect buyer to seller, the smallholder, and the farmers and family farmers community with the seller. At the end of the day, these produce need to be sold. How do we develop them? Is by creating the second one, market development. Number 3 is to include what we believe R&D and innovation as a part even of the IFAD theory of change. We need to have a network, which is already established, but need to expand it, a network of innovation, ecosystem connecting to research and development. We are coming into a coming crisis, the end of this year maybe, on fertilizer issues. This is a very important that we need to come up with an innovative solution as well in order to help our fellow farmers. The capacity building, and this can be done through the FFS and expanding and supporting the program to make the farming sexy, which I really like this very nice motto. Project delivery, which is very important. Sometimes there is a lot of cost being spent on administration costs with regard to project delivery. This is what one of the IFAD issues. We need to improve project delivery and project management. And I end with what been already mentioned, inclusive governance. The inclusive governance require stakeholder management. That's the idea is. Financing, that's one side. Research groups, another side. The family farmers, the farmers themselves, this community, whether they are native or other type, other different structure of, let me put it this way, farming structure. If you can put them all together in one single platform, enabled with proper technology, we will definitely enhance even the sustainable food system, where IFAD can feed into that food system. At the end, I would like to summarize. This time I'm not taking too much time to mention this is an agro platform where it can be financed through a capital market. That's a flagship project, can be very well sold and marketable project that can get many, can drive a fund from the capital market. Also, it can be financed by many other philanthropic organizations, especially at this time where the whole world is facing multiple crises, and the most being hit by this crisis are our farmers, families, and low-income countries.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahdi. And I'll turn the floor to Mr. Patanayak.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I can only say the second question should essentially concentrate on, the answers should concentrate on partnership with almost every stakeholder on the globe. And that includes not only the governments, it will be the non-governmental organizations, the civil society bodies, the financial institutions, the private sector, the research and academic institutions, and last but not the least, the UN system in general and the Rome-based organizations. So partnership is the key for smallholder farmers. Having said that, I would like to concentrate again on empowering the farmers, because they are the small farmers, they are the vulnerable farmers. So, but we can empower them by forming what is called the farmer producer organizations. And they will have the necessary momentum to take forward this agenda of adding value to the primary produce. And as my colleague, borrowing a leaf from what my colleague mentioned, the electronic platform is the key for this success, because the buyers and sellers can really get together and sell to the market without any intermediaries. When the intermediaries are not there, then the benefit which accrues to the population is much higher. Second aspect is I would like to promote the local food. And to promote local food, many of the earlier food has been forgotten, and local food is more adapted and suited to the local conditions and to the local climate. In India, I have promoted the climate smart food. When I say climate smart food, they're basically the millets. And this is why I pitched for the celebration of the International Year of the Millet. And through FAO, the resolution was passed, and 2023 has been announced as the International Year of the Millet. So the second aspect is we must monetize the biodiversity. It is not enough that we only say thank you to our indigenous groups, that they are the protector of biodiversity. We must monetize this if they protect the biodiversity. And if someone is using the gene pool in the external market, they must be paid for it, because they have saved this for generation. So this is another aspect. The wealth of the biodiversity wealth has to be protected. We must also protect the farmer's right in terms of saving his seed. Today, the seed is completely in the hand of multinational corporations. In fact, if the farmers save the seeds and we provide the necessary knowledge, they can save it for a better day, and they can minimize the cost of production. And we must concentrate on renewable energy. It addresses the issue of climate change, as well as it gives more money in the hands of the farmer. In India, we have installed solar panels in the farmer's field. So the farmer is not only getting money from the crop he is growing, he's also growing, he's also selling the power to the grid and making much more money. That is how we have doubled the farmer's income. We must attract youth to agriculture by digitalizing it. Today, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs are coming and starting new startups in my own country. Why can't they do so even in remote in Africa or anywhere? So this is another area which we must do. We must pay for the ecosystem services. In India, I'll just give an example and stop before I finish out of my time. The people who are who protect the bees and they produce honey, they migrate the bee in search of bee flora. And when they migrate to a land where bee flora is present, they pay to the owner of that land or that ecosystem some money. And this is how the ecosystem services are also monetized, where it is a win-win situation. There are many different innovative things which are happening around the world. IFAD should be the collector of all this knowledge and spread it out to the globe. Today, then the world will become, the economy will become inclusive, productive, sustainable, and resilient, and address the issues of youth, women, indigenous people, and people with disabilities. Many opportunities are there, and I'm certain with this proactive approach, we can eradicate poverty and also remove hunger from this planet. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patanayak, and a special thank you to all our candidates who are making excellent time. We're now coming to the final question for this section, which I have a feeling may take less than 5 minutes each. And the question is, if you had to choose 3 keywords to describe your vision for the future leadership of IFAD, which ones would you pick? So we'll start with you once again, Mr. Lario. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Indeed, 3 words. So I would say inclusive, probably climate smart, and assembler of development finance. So in terms of inclusive, I think it's fundamental, and what differentiates IFAD from other organizations is actually how we do development. Many times there's a question, what's the niche of IFAD, where should we be? It's very clear to me. I mean, the main goal of IFAD is actually to make sure that we eradicate hunger and we eradicate all forms of malnutrition in rural areas as well as poverty. Whether it's with, then on that dimension, we have also seen, for example, that climate is a very important part that we need to also include to break the cycle of actually inequality, of forced migration, of conflict. So that's part also of an important part of what we need to make sure that it's at the center of IFAD. But the main difference is, apart from being in rural areas, there's others who are in rural areas. But the way that IFAD operates is by bringing together the entire community, by bringing together the farmers organization. The networks it has established over 40 years are fundamental. The links we have with governments, whereby we're even repaid before others are repaid in other multilateral development banks because of the relationship. So that network of farmer organizations, of bringing them together, of being inclusive, community-driven, is fundamental. In terms of being an assembler of development finance, I think we are seeing that the official development assistance, especially for agriculture, has been stalling and being stagnating for the last 2 decades, whereas ODA for health or ODA for humanitarian assistance has been increasing. So in that front, I think we need to make sure that we partner with climate-like-minded institutions, where it's the Green Climate Fund, whether it's JEF, whether it's GAFSP, as well as other, I would say, UN movements like the SAM movement, but also other UN organizations, the RBAs, and we can discuss how this can be done and in what fronts. Also bringing co-financing from national governments, I think that's extremely important. Co-financing from other IFIs will also be very important because the complementarity is there. IFAD does and works in an area where others don't. As an example, for example, the African Development Bank or African Development Fund, in their own projects, they mention up to 5 times less small farm holders. So actually that niche of small farm holders, family farming, is fundamental for IFAD's niche and for IFAD to make an impact in the current crisis. And finally, just to say that I place a lot of value on trust. Many of the changes, reforms, and actually alignment with the different countries, with different rural and civil organizations, has been fundamental to make sure that we have an institution that is fit for purpose and that is able actually to make an impact. So I would say that constant dialogue and inclusiveness and trust between the different partners will continue to be fundamental if I am elected president. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mahdi, 3 words to describe your vision for IFAD.
I have one statement which I iterated many times in my campaign, and it reads as follows. If the first generation depend on external finance to survive, the second generation should be independent. This is my key words with regard to development. This is my motto. But I'm trying to emphasize that the role of IFAD which is helping in the rural development, should create an independent second generation ecosystem. And the main objective on this goal to be achieved, that will require a lot of efforts to transform what is being currently done nicely to a nicer way of doing things. I do believe that improving project delivery on the ground is very important. Partnership with the communities and listening to the communities. At the end of the day, they are the beneficiaries. They are the one need to be listened to, their voices. We need to establish and expand on the policy dialogue with regard to this problem, improving the partnership on that perspective. I am trying to implement the agro platform, which is nevertheless exists as in a fragmented way in the scope of what the operation done in IFAD. It's a matter of consolidating all of the nice program being there in a holistic, integrated, holistic view. This is what I'm trying to send a message of making our focus in serving the family farmers, serving the smallholders, that we need to work on the second generation of the farmer need to be independent. Independence is the key. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahdi. Mr. Patanaik, your 3 words to describe your vision for IFAD. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My first keyword would be impact. The greater the impact on the ground, the better will be our visibility, and the more the cooperation will be from all the donors. So therefore, we need to generate better impact on the ground for its operation, to improve smallholder production and productivity, and accelerate in the direction of meeting the SDGs and reduce rural poverty, hunger, and malnutrition, and attain the goals. So that is the key word is impact. The second key word for me would be inclusion. It is embedded in IFAD's vision, but we must target the poorest in the world, the most marginalized rural people, and we must focus on women, the tribal people, the pastoralists, the person with disabilities, the rural youth, and the fishers, so that no one is left behind. So this is, and we must develop a strategy to target this inequality, and then only we can be successful, and IFAD can itself pronounce that it is a successful organization. The third key word for me would be efficiency. Efficiency is the key to success for any organization. We must generate more value for money. Resources are not infinite, it is limited, and we must ensure that it is efficiently used. And when I say this, we must be efficient and cost effective in all our operations, whether be it at the institutional level, the regional level, the country level. And for this, a set of actions is necessary. That is different. I would not like to elaborate, but we should generate more value for money. Unless we generate more value for money, the organizations over a period of time will lose its vitality, and it needs to be resilience, and therefore it has to be efficient. These are my 3 keywords: impact, inclusion, and efficiency. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patanaik, and thank you so much to all the candidates for sharing their thoughts with us. We will be coming back to you for the second part of our session. We will have some questions and comments from the audience. But before we do that, I want to turn the floor to Mr. Daniel Fatibeni, who will be giving us the answers from our Slido question that we posted earlier, and she will be announcing the second poll.
I'm very glad to join you all from all over the world, connecting from different time zones to this event. We heard from our colleagues that there are more than 200 people connected to the event, so we're more than happy to have you with us. Let's start with the poll. Which should be the main priorities for IFAD? We see from the people who have voted that there is a strong majority of them choosing the first option, supporting smallholder farmers and communities with 86% of votes. And then second place for boosting private investments on sustainable agriculture, followed by protecting biodiversity and supporting projects on climate change mitigation, and last but not least, empowering the most vulnerable groups like indigenous people. We can launch now the second poll for our survey. I remind you again the rules for the game. You have two options. You can either scan the QR code and vote through the app, or you can go to the website slide.do, enter the event code IFAD, and then vote in the survey. And the second question, before I give the floor again back to Rumbi, is what are the most immediate food and nutrition security challenges for the next IFAD president? Option 1, increase food systems resilience to external shocks, for instance, food prices hikes that are linked to the war in Ukraine, climate change. Option 2, agricultural land for planetary health, meaning diversification of sustainable agricultural production that supports biodiversity and climate resilience and enhances regional food and nutrition security to support health of humans and ecosystems. Option 3, avoid trade restrictions to support especially importing countries. Option 4, investing in greener and organic fertilizers to ensure nutritious and sustainable food production. And option 5, addressing the barriers that slow down the creation of shorter food value chains. Rumbi, the floor is yours again. So I know we have a rich Q&A, so I will stop myself and I will keep people voting on Slido. And again, from the whole organizing team here from Rome, thank you so much for making this possible. So the floor is yours again.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And yes, indeed, we do have a rich Q&A session. So in this session, we're going to take a few questions and comments from the audience. Thereafter, we'll give our candidates 3 minutes to respond. I understand you might not be able to get to all the questions, but please do answer as much as you can within the 3 minutes. So first and foremost, I'm just going to call upon Mr. Ricardo Fort, who's a senior researcher at Grupo de Análisis para el Desarrollo. I hope I say that correctly, but it's GRADE or GRADE for short.
Grade. Okay, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations to the organizers and candidates for putting this consultation together. I think it helps a lot to understand and contrast their different positions. I am Ricardo Fort, an economist from Peru. I work as a senior researcher at the Group for the Analysis of Development, GRADE. It's an independent think tank in Peru, which is also part of the Southern Voice network of think tanks in the Global South. So it's very difficult to ask a new question after so many questions, but I will try to focus on some things that I found very compelling in the different discussions that we have had, and also in the questions that the candidate has been asking. I was very happy actually to see that despite very different backgrounds and approaches, most of them agree on a couple of very important things. I would like to ask them to further develop those. No? One of them is the need for a broader approach of rural development and the reduction of rural poverty, which means that agricultural intervention should be only a part of a bigger or more holistic development program, no? And I guess it's a challenge as this is an agricultural fund, and it has been a challenge for a while, and IFAD has been able to move a little bit to this new approach in the last decades, right? And the second one, kind of related to the first, is the need for a stronger coordination with other agencies. It has been mentioned by many of the speakers and even for the candidates. FAO, World Food Program, CGR, development banks, to articulate different programs and interventions with them, no? And I focus on this because even when at the global level, sometimes we see, or there is supposed to be differentiation and coordination of these different agencies, actually our experience working in different countries in the global south is that the articulation usually is very low and potential spillovers are lost, no? Somebody at the beginning mentioned that they used to work in silos, right? And that's part of the experience that we have had in many years. So my question for the candidates will be, what do you think should be the focus of IFAD programs and interventions in this more holistic development approach? Shall it concentrate more in some countries, some type of farmers, some type of projects? Shall IFAD keep doing a little bit of everything within this development approach? Or put it in another way, is there some things that IFAD should not do and leave the responsibility of those groups or those areas or those type of interventions to other related institutions, no? And finally, how to improve that coordination. And I'm talking about the coordination in the recipient countries, right? With other institutions that do similar things. What incentives or instruments can IFAD put in place to boost this articulation? And maybe if you have some examples of how can we develop that in different countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fort. And we're going to call upon Mr. Francesco Rampa to give us the second question. We will take, I think, 5 questions before we hand over to the candidates.
Yeah, hello everyone, and well gathered. It's a congratulations to all the candidates. I'm Francesco Rampa from ECDPM, and I'm part of the European think tank group. Maybe a double how question, and already congratulations for all the points the candidates have made, because you seem to have a great vision forward, but the devil is in the details. So maybe a how question on the finance and a how question on the multi-stakeholder partnerships. Last year, the richer countries committed already to spend and reallocate part of the special drawing rights that were issued by the IMF in favor of low-income countries. And I imagine we all could agree that because of the emerging food crisis now, more specifically, these resources should be spent for food security and food system transformation. So I guess, do you agree that IFAD should be using the SDR? Most of you would say yes, but how would you go about it? Receiving funds, of course, IFAD is willing and able to spend more, but how would you actually go about accessing the SDRs? Do you agree? And what concretely would be your first action as a president to actually make use of the SDR as IFAD? Similarly, most of you very correctly, and we couldn't agree more as think tankers, that multi-stakeholder partnerships are key to have impact. It's very complicated, food systems, food security. You must, and you are already engaging with civil society, researchers. But in order to, one, really connect science to policy to practice, and in order to go faster sometimes, the government-to-government relation in food security action, you need someone who broker multi-stakeholder partnerships. The question is, wouldn't you agree that here in Rome, with IFAD, FAO, and World Food Program being all here, we need a permanent coalition, like today we have in the room, of think tankers and NGOs and indigenous groups who together help someone like IFAD to have impact on the ground, to understand the complexity of multi-stakeholder partnerships and really make progress beyond certain decisions that you guys make. But IFAD is also a government to government, so things sometimes move slow. Wouldn't you agree we must have in Rome a group of think tankers, civil society, who help you achieving impact? Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rampa. Next, we'll have a question from Ms. Yuseli Tapias Aquila.
Buenas tardes a todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Primero quiero darle gracias a Dios por la oportunidad de estar aquí representando a los jóvenes rurales de Colombia. Agradezco a las organizaciones que hicieron parte, que organizaron este gran foro de consulta pública. Gracias por permitirse escuchar la voz de los jóvenes como una esperanza para la transformación de la ruralidad. Mucho gusto, ya lo decía la presentadora, mi nombre es Jaisuli Tapias, soy una joven rural desplazada por el conflicto armado en Colombia desde los 13 años, trabajo hace 15 años con organizaciones de base, organizaciones de jóvenes como lo es ASOGE y como lo es la Red Nacional de Jóvenes Rurales en Colombia. Me disculpo de antemano por no poder hablar inglés, de hecho no lo sé hablar, es un desafío que tenemos actualmente los jóvenes rurales, tenemos pocas oportunidades para aprender otro tipo de idioma y esto muchas veces limita nuestras gestiones, pero gracias a ustedes por no ver en mí esto como una limitación para encontrarnos, sino como una oportunidad de construir juntos desde la juventud. El FIDA ha ocupado un papel relevante en términos de innovación, además de colaborar en brindarnos oportunidades a través de sus proyectos y donaciones. Nos ofreció un modelo centrado en la confianza. Dejamos de ser beneficiarios y nos ayudó a convertirnos en actores con voz propia, valorizó nuestras capacidades, confió en nuestras ideas e iniciativas, nos abrió las puertas de la institucionalidad nacional relevante, nos facilitó nuestro propio crecimiento como sujetos y actores sociales relevantes. Prueba de ello es que estoy yo hoy aquí frente a ustedes y no un intermediario de nuestras voces. Esto no se puede perder. Esto hay que seguirlo ampliando, hay que dar una capacidad de innovación y creación que el FIDA ha aportado a Colombia y a otros países, rompiendo con mecanismos tradicionales de apoyo al sector rural en general. Somos las organizaciones de base, yo creo que lo decía decían los candidatos, somos las organizaciones de base liderada por los mismos jóvenes con resultados reales e innovadores, el mejor vehículo de comunicación entre el FIDA y los jóvenes y la mejor apuesta a la transformación rural de nuestro país. Así que hoy los invito a que trabajemos juntos unos con otros y lograr un cambio sostenible y esperanzador para las nuevas generaciones. Bueno, por lo tanto, y en relación con los compromisos que el FIDA ha tomado con los jóvenes rurales en el Plan de Acción para la Juventud Rural, hoy quiero hacer dos preguntas básicas muy importantes para nosotros los jóvenes, y es que el FIDA tiene un compromiso y es de que el 60% de sus proyectos tendrá el enfoque hacia la juventud. Ahora mi pregunta es, ¿cuál es vuestra visión? ¿Cuáles son las características claves para una política de desarrollo direccionada para los jóvenes rurales? Y dos, ¿qué mecanismos y dispositivos piensan adoptar dentro del FIDA para dar continuidad a lo que se planteó a partir de la aprobación de los documentos de compromiso con los jóvenes? Más en concreto, ¿cómo llegar a institucionalizar de una manera continua y no ocasional la participación y el involucramiento activo de los jóvenes en las operaciones del FIDA en todas las etapas del ciclo de proyecto y sobre todo a nivel de terreno? Creo que ese terreno es la base es la idea es principal que debemos de tener en cuenta. Entonces esas son mis preguntas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Ms. Akila. And next up, we're going to have a question from Ms. Ambra Raghi.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the organizers of this consultation and the three candidates for the availability. My name is Ambra Raghi, and I am an engagement manager at the World Farmers Organization. To present quickly the organization, the World Farmers Organization represents farmers organizations and cooperatives across the globe. We now count 76 farmers organizations and cooperatives from 53 countries. WFO works as a close partner of IFAD, especially in the Farmers Forum, and so do our members at national level in projects and activities carried by IFAD. So we really value being here today. Thank you. There has been already a very rich discussion, and I must say we cannot agree more on the importance of fostering innovation and empower youth and women farmers, as mentioned many times from the three candidates. And I would like also to take this opportunity to stress the importance on continuously involving farmers organizations and their cooperatives to make sure IFAD can really reach the last mile, as mentioned by Mr. Lario. So I would like to ask to the candidates, how would they broaden and strengthen the engagement of farmers organizations and continuously create opportunity for farmers organizations and their farmers at all levels, global, regional, and national? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Raggi. And next, we're going to hand over the floor to Mr. Paul Newnham.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to take the floor. I am from the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, and we work with UN, private sector, and civil society organizations. And we've enjoyed a very close collaboration with IFAD on a number of things, including elevating the voice and perspective of smallholder farmers and small-scale food producers. We see small-scale farmers and small-scale food producers at the forefront of the interconnected and compounding crises we face today. And as such, we have been working with them to develop a consensus that is around policy with a call to action built out of work from the Series 2030 report that really helps to enable a policy framework to really step up, to align, innovate, and partner to navigate all of these multiple interconnected pressures and shocks that they're facing. We see that at the moment we have, and many have talked about these compounding crises with the impact of COVID, conflict in Ukraine, and this has pointed to the vulnerabilities in our system. And so we believe also that these small-scale food producers are part of the solution to this crisis that we find. And we've worked with them on this policy consensus and call to action. My question is, what do you think the international community must do in the wake of these crises to position and support smallholders? We have 8 years left to 2030. So what would be your priority in order to drive this forward? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Newnham, and thank you so much to all the audience members that have raised their questions. We have quite a lot of questions from a lot of different stakeholders, and unfortunately to my candidates, we only have 3 minutes. I understand you won't be able to answer everything within those 3 minutes, but we hope that you take the opportunity after this to reach out to the different groups and continue these discussions. So Mr. Lario, I hand the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best to try to get to the last question. My experience has taught me that on the first question on the approach of projects, my experience has taught me that development interventions are most effective when these are part of a holistic portfolio of interventions rather than isolated projects. So therefore, development programs are more effective when they focus on a number of complex and interrelated objectives, but are not a single one like nutrition or climate resilience. So this reinforces the importance of mainstreaming themes. With respect to the working partners, I would say, I mentioned them before already, IFAD, GCF, national governments. So I think that has been on what IFAD could stop doing. I would say not humanitarian, not big rural infrastructure, not big agriculture. So maintain family farming, maintaining development and resilience. On the coordination of recipient countries, I think now with the resident coordinator and IFAD decentralization, this will be a key part of having a joint policy by all the organizations. On question number 2 on the SDRs, I think there's 3 possibilities. One would be to receive it as capital directly, but it's very difficult because central banks actually have a lot of restrictions. And the other 2 that we're working on is working through IMF. As I said before, we tried already to bring it as one of the key topics of the Resilient Trust Fund. It was not possible. We will continue, and I think there was a voice here, and we will ask your support to continue trying to do it. On Rome, I do think there's, when I reach out to think tanks, many times it's in Washington, sometimes in Europe, but I think we need to strengthen it, especially on the food security here in Rome, and make Rome the locus of food security. On question number 3, it was very inspiring to hear about the model based on confidence and a unique voice. I think that I mentioned some of the policies vis-a-vis youth and the importance of farm activities, distribution, and creating jobs. So that continues to be a very important part. On question number 4, on broadening and strengthening farmers' organizations, I think IFAD does quite a good job. Perhaps we can do better. And we have the International Land Coalition, we have the Remittances Facility, we have the Indigenous People Forum where we participate, but there's more facilities and platforms. I think it's important to actually engage and to have that dialogue. And finally, on question number 5, on the international community. I mean, there's lots. I've been encouraged by the number of alliances and initiatives that we have put together. Unfortunately, there are now so many that it's not that easy to know which ones to prioritize. We have been talking about Farm, G7, Germany, IFAD, US Treasury, UN Global Crisis Response, Food Truck, but we have the knowledge, we have the know-how, we have the institutions. So actually what's missing currently is that coordination and the financing. There has been an underinvestment for many decades, and we need to make sure that we step up and scale up the financing of resilient food systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lario. I did not think that would be possible, but thank you for getting to all those questions. Mr. Mahdi, you have the floor.
Okay, now let me lump the whole question into three parts, but I will start with the last three questions because they are all related to engagement and listening to the voices of the people on the ground, the voices of the youth, the voices of the farmer, the youth of the WFO, the organization, and I'm very glad that it's been mentioned here. The advocacy of the SDG 2. At the end of the day, how to put them in one single platform that can be considered as an advisory to the presidency of IFAD. And I did work many times with the civil societies during my career, and I found them very powerful and very productive if we have an advisory platform. Currently, with the current technology, we can have the first virtual youth advisory platform that can be supporting the IFAD presidency and keeping the presidency also attached to the ground. At the end of the day, when we are very busy with the management end of the business as usual and this routine, we might feel disconnected from the grassroots. And this is where we should plan it from day one on how to connect to the grassroots through what I call an advisory board that connect representative from farmer organization and many others. As of the SDR, which is a very interesting question, and we had a lot of discussion with in Kuwait, I mean, in my local context, on how do you tap the SDR and what is considered be a compelling reason to go and tap the SDR. There is no consensus on how and when to tap the SDR. As you know, it's been tapped during a very heavy financial crisis around the world, and this is where the SDR can be tapped. I do believe that with the intensity of food crisis issue being very much intensified slowly and surely, the tapping of the SDR will be maybe an easier. However, to convince IMF on that tapping, I have to agree with Alvaro, it's not an easy task. It's not, you can try once and more, but you need to build coalition in order to reach that. Now, the first question, which is very crucial, honestly, and I will state my opinion frankly and honestly. If I look at the Rome-based agency, the RBA is here in Rome, what I see is an overlapping mandate is being implemented with an overlapping practice. A member state, when they sign for the establishment of WFP and FAO and IFAD, they should work complementing each other, complementary. But what is going on right now, everyone is stabbing on the other one feet. And this is what we need to clarify. And I will, as an IFAD president, will take the lead on talking to the leadership and this organization to work as complementary, especially during the time of crisis. Many organizations in the UN, actually sometimes they have this redundancy or overlapping in their operation. However, their mandate, stick to the mandate, stick to the fundamental, they are complementing, supposed to be complementing each other. Now, if we look at the UN reform, which is currently going on, it is definitely one of the ways on how to create a cooperative frame between organizations serving for the same purpose. And this was at the purpose of the SDG 17 or the agenda, the SDG agenda in the first place, is how all of these UN organizations work complementing each other, not competing with each other for tackling the problem. And that's require a lot of dialogue. Over to you, Ramvi. So that's
Thank you so much.
nutshell answering the 5 questions being raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahdi. Mr. Patnaik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So far as Richard's question is concerned, we are very clear on this. The focus should be on the lower income countries. We have the SOFI report coming out from FAO at regular intervals. And exactly we know, we can pinpoint where the malnutrition, poverty, and hunger is there. And so therefore our effort should be to concentrate on that. Secondly, there are problems of pockets of poverty in many countries of the world. For that, I think there has to be an exchange of knowledge, and there are best practices and solutions which have been found out. And that can be, if IFAD can provide the necessary platform to transfer this knowledge. Having said that, so far as multi-sectoral partnership is concerned and drawing of special drawing rights, of course, it is today it is the sole right of the sovereign government to access it. And therefore, perhaps at this stage, it may be a little difficult, but of course, the dialogue can be initiated. There is nothing wrong in that, but that's a long haul, and I don't want to enter into that. But the Rome-based collaboration is definitely a very viable alternative. We are not doing enough. There is scope for doing much, and we must also work in close coordination with the UN team in individual countries, because the earlier framework which was there, the UNDAF, has now been renamed as the United Nations Sustainable Development Framework, and there is great scope for working together. And we not only should do that only at the country level, we must also do it at the regional levels and also at the institutional level. There is a need to have a permanent coalition of these bodies even in Rome, because that is the purpose for which in Rome all the 3 were headquarters. And though I may differ from my friend that they may be overlapping, I feel there are areas in which they are not overlapping, and there we must work together. Then coming to the question of how to engage the farmers organization, I think time has come. There is already a platform in IFAD to engage the farmers organization. But more than that, we must engage farmers organization in decision making in the individual countries, and therefore policy advocacy with individual countries should be taken up in a very big way. In India, we are today, the farmers are called to a meeting before the budget is pronounced. So similarly, we can think of doing that. We can involve them in project designing, in identifying the priorities, and also develop their capacity to engage fruitfully with the main actors. Then coming to the smallholder farmers, the SDG 2, well, Mr. Paul Newham has mentioned, the compounding crisis to support smallholder farmers. Of course, there are a large number of coalitions. There is the UN Decade of Family Farming. There is the CFS voluntary guidelines. There is a Decade of Action on Declaration. There is Food Producers Declaration. There is a Global Alliance of Food Security and so on. But all the signals emanating from all these global forums should be embedded in the objectives of IFAD, and IFAD must find out ways and means to address these signals, because these new signals, it is not enough. Let's say the latest one, the Global Alliance on Food Security. Not only there are signals emanating, there are also financial resources which are also earmarked. So therefore, we must embed them so that we get the financial resources to carry on, and we keep ahead of the curve in terms of addressing these issues. This is in short my entire approach. I'm sorry I missed my friend from Colombia because I didn't have the translation facility. I could not understand the question. So therefore, please pardon me for that. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patnaik. We are going to go into the next round of questions, and I really appreciate that our candidates are trying to get to all the questions. So first up, I'm going to call Ms. Myrna Cunningham. May you please take to the floor.
Thank you very much. Naksa Al Sutralam Kulatara Maikisna, I greet you from my indigenous territory, the Miskito Indigenous Nation from Nicaragua. And on behalf of the Steering Committee of Indigenous Peoples at Forum at IFAD that represents Indigenous peoples from the different regions of the world, we account for 6% of the world population, but 80% of the world's poor. And IFAD has more than 3 decades of experience working with indigenous peoples to promote sustainable, self-driven development and livelihoods. And with IFAD, in the last years, we have developed a proposal of policy that was adopted in 2010. And related with that policy, we have a forum, we have a financial small IPAF, and we also have been working with IPAF to develop and operationalize that policy at country level. My question to the candidates is, what will you do to enhance our participation in decision-making bodies at corporate level in IFAD, from Rome base at regions and in country? My second question is, how do you visualize your support on policy dialogue in the countries where you will be promoting operations that can enhance indigenous people's participation in the whole cycle of the project? And my third question is, what is your commitment in resources that will go to our facility as indigenous peoples and improve more projects on indigenous territories? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cunningham. Next, we're going to Ms. Ignacia Fernandez.
Thank you for the opportunity to share with you in this public consultation for IFAD, the President. My name is Ignacia Fernandez. I'm an associate researcher at REMIS, the Latin American Center for Rural Development, based at Santiago de Chile. And I want to ask you about a critical issue in REMIS reflection nowadays. In Latin America, as you know, as well in other regions of the global south, food insecurity is critically acute among the most vulnerable farmers, such as women, indigenous people, and others. You have been talking about this during this session. There are a lot of underlying causes that have to do with its inequalities in access to opportunities, land, marketing channels, financing, technical transfers, and some new, more recently, global stresses such as climate change, the COVID pandemic, that are exacerbating these inequalities. We also think that not everything is adverse. Some opportunities for the transformations of agri-food system are also perceived, as well as the one related to the acceleration of the digitization processes with the spread of information and communication technologies in rural areas. So the scenario is one of some lights, but many more shadows. And there is considerable consensus on the objectives of the transformation of agri-food system should pursue, and you have been talking about this. But we think, and this is the question we want you to point, is there is not the same consensus on how this transformation should be carried out. And a special controversial issue is the place of agroecology. So we think there is an opportunity for the transformation of agri-food system towards agroecology, but despite the obvious potentialities, agroecology is often conceived as traditional agriculture. So in this context, my question for the candidates is, what space do you think the agroecology should occupy in the framework of the necessary transformation of agri-food systems, if you think it should occupy any, and how can IFAD contribute to that strategy for introduction more and more agroecology if you think it is needed? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fernandez. At this point, I'll also call upon Ms. Ujani Halim. May you please ask your question?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you, all the panelists. Very enriching discussion. My name is Dr. Ujjaini Halim. I'm from India, and I am a steering committee member of the Farmers Forum representing World Forum of Fish Harvesters and Fish Workers. So here, basically, I am representing a constituency that is small-scale fishers, also small-scale food producers there. And naturally, I understand when all the panelists they spoke about agriculture, fishery is a part of that, but I would like to know a little bit more specifically what are the plans of IFAD in funding for sustainable fishery, small-scale fishery, kind of empowering small-scale fishers, climate adaptive fishery, etc. So the resource allocation, of course, I mean, I cannot say that there should be a kind of proportional resource allocation for the small-scale food producers, and that is not only agriculture. Of course, agriculture is farming is a big part of this agriculture thing. The other two very small, and here I just want to remember the very good contribution of IFAD in supporting the international guideline on small-scale fisheries, which is kind of adopted, endorsed by all the countries. It's very nice to hear all the panelists, or particularly I very much like to kind of echo what Dr. Patnaik said about inclusion, and which is linked with reducing inequality. I think that is very fundamental. Inclusion can only happen when inequality is reduced, and also the panelists talked about gender transformative process. My question here specifically is, when we talk about gender transformative process, we do see a lot of policy contradictions at the national level. So how as the head of IFAD, or how IFAD is going to address this policy issues, how to ensure policy coherence for gender transformative approach, for further pushing gender transformative approach. And finally, I would also like to know whether safe food and sustainable agriculture is on top priority. I think it's too many questions in 2 minutes time. I hope I have maintained time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Halim. I'm sure they will try to get to all those questions. And our final question will come from Ms. Elizabeth Nsimadala. Please take to the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Elizabeth Nsimadala. I'm a smallholder farmer from Uganda, representing smallholder voices through the Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, where I'm the president, the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization, where I'm the director in charge of women affairs, and at the World Farmers Organization, where I represent Africa constituency. For purposes of this discussion, I want to focus it on the partnership that IFAD has built with the Pan-Africa Farmers Organization for over time. And first is to thank IFAD for the support that we've enjoyed as Pan-Africa Farmers Organization and our membership that has been sustained for the last 15 years. This support has helped us as farmers organization to develop our capacities through training and learning and strengthening our membership in terms of governance, representation, being able to effectively lobby and advocate for our membership. And this has been direct or as, through IFAD as a supervising entity. And through this support, we have been able to leverage additional support to be able to build partnerships with other actors and also support innovations amongst ourselves. And as farmer leaders, we've also built strong bonds with the past IFAD presidents, and we hope this is going to be sustained. We have noted that the decentralization process, which is being conducted to enhance effectiveness in management, our focal contacts and support has warned. All our direct programs were mainly through the departments that are based in Rome and not at the sub-regional level. We know that the project portfolios are large, and the support to farmers organizations, of course, is not as significant in terms of resource envelope. And our worry is that this disparity may eventually lead to all support diminishing from IFAD in the new arrangement. Now, my question is, how will the new president ensure that the long-term relationship that has been built between the regional farmers organizations is maintained? And second one, how can we better support, how can we be better supported to be more effective in terms of policy advocacy and more so to the ever-changing environment in terms of climate change, international and continental trade, in the area of ICT, food systems, youth and women participation in agriculture? Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nsimadala. I will not take any time. I will hand the floor straight over to Mr. Lario.
Thank you very much. This is getting tougher to answer the four because that's a whole mandate, I would say. On question one, perhaps on indigenous people and what can be done, I think it's important that we pay attention to key project design elements, I mean, including the definition of target groups and manage to develop a tailored and differentiated approach to target indigenous people. I think there are very good examples of investment projects where they will have achieved empowerment of indigenous people, particularly those that we have seen with participatory approach built on the indigenous people knowledge, skills, culture, traditional values. On the participation, I would say it has been exemplary in terms of the Indigenous People Forum and initiatives like the IPAD, and the majority of its board members are representative of indigenous peoples organizations. So, and its management has been decentralized actually to regional indigenous peoples organizations. So it's effective, but clearly we can look into it. On question number two in Latin America, I think the key issue in such a region where you have countries with upper middle income, very few lower income, obviously it's inequality, like it has been mentioned. And we are seeing a big impact in terms of the inflation pressures on food, on fuel. So it's a worrisome situation. With respect to agroecology and the question, well, agroecology is sustainable farming that works with nature. I think it's important that, as I said before, we have failed to put a price on nature, and that accounts for trillions of dollars in hidden costs related to climate, to biodiversity, livelihoods. So regenerating nature, tackling climate change, protecting biodiversity, reversing deforestation, degradation of carbon-rich ecosystems like peatland or mangroves, scaling consumption of sustainable aquatic protein, now that we're going to talk about fisheries, restoring soil health, all of that is fundamental for small fund holders. So that will be continued to be supported as a key issue. With respect to fisheries and marine ecosystems, I would say that it's clear that climate change and environmental degradation are happening in coastal areas, especially in small island developing states, and the consequences for small fund holders are clear. We have the loss of fish stocks, loss of agricultural land due to flooding, coastal erosion, lack of clean fresh water, loss of biodiversity, migration, conflict. So I think generally, both the combination of fisheries, marine ecosystems, and climate will be also fundamental. And finally, on the question from farmers organization, the key issue of decentralization is to put more people on the ground to be able to reinforce that, I would say, policy component. So hopefully, once the full decentralization has happened, you will see that further support that you're asking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lario. I'll turn the floor to Mr. Madi.
Thank you very much. What I want to introduce here is the concept of lenses when we are looking at and evaluating a project. Let me put it this way. That combine eco, gender, and geographical lens when it comes to prioritization of financing projects. The gender lens, which has been introduced formally by the World Bank, and it's also being used by different UN organizations, is to look at where is gender being taken care of and the project is being evaluated. At the end, IFAD is financing project, and these projects need to be looked at from gender lens eye. There is also another lens that we can introduce is the eco lens, which is what will be the ecological impact when it comes to this project. And that's more of a 360 degree on the evaluation of project. The third one, which comes in the prioritization of project with respect to geographical. Now, I would go back to the main UN slogan, no one should be left behind, whether native, whether indigenous, whether farmers, and we have to keep them all on the same equal footing. And the whole idea of the policy dialogue, and this is where I visualize myself as being the president of IFAD, in the dialogue that need to be always be running with communities at the grassroots level. No one should be left behind. This is the main slogan, and this is what IFAD is actually targeting. Fishery farming, I would look at it from as a holistic farming and fishery perspective. So it is not being left, and maybe we didn't talk about it, but it doesn't mean it is being ignored. Thank you very much, and I would like to thank you all for taking this initiative to exchange the idea. And by the way, this is my first time to see the other candidate alive. Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahdi, for joining us. Thank you. And at this point, I'm going to turn to Mr. Patanayak. Your answers, please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I can only say that with regard to the first question, we must recognize that the indigenous people are the holders of traditional knowledge. And this traditional knowledge, which is confined to them, has to come out. And this can only come out provided we engage them in active by giving them a platform so that they can participate. And once we participate, this information will flow, because I have seen in my limited interactions that they hold a great deep knowledge in herbal and medicinal plants knowledge. And today we need that for combating the various diseases. And therefore, the participation of indigenous people should be formalized with IFAD with greater vigor and more at regular intervals. So far as Madam Ignatia's question is concerned, the agroecological approach is a solution for really poor and vulnerable people. In fact, we just in India, we tapped the GEF funds to get a project for adopting what is called the zero-based natural farming for 5 different states, provincial governments. And it's now reached a movement by which tens and thousands of people are involved with no input from outside. And it is successful, it is science-based, and we need to study this more in order to really scale it up in a very big way. It is only in the 2nd or 3rd year of its existence. Coming to the third question, which Madam Ujjaini raised regarding fishermen and fisherwomen. Of course, the traditional fishermen are still going in the traditional crafts to the high seas. There is a need to mechanize those crafts and also to provide small fisheries harbor. Perhaps time has come, IFAD, to look at such projects. They might have done in some states, which I don't have knowledge right now, but certainly they should be involved. So far as inland fisheries is concerned, there's great scope to promote fisheries in the riverine systems, then the reservoirs, and so on. So far as inland fisheries is concerned, we have adopted what is called integrated farming, a combination of livestock, inland fisheries, and crop system. And this is going on in different parts of the country. This will be a solution to the food insecurity, and the gender also can be subsumed in this because it is the women folk who resort to this. Coming to Madam Elizabeth's question on the the smallholder farmers, it is seen that farmers' organization can really support changes in what is being done at present. We need to equip them and strengthen their capacity so that they can become innovators. They are innovators in a way, but we don't document these innovative practices. Time has come for individual countries to honor these innovators. Once these innovators are honored, they get recognition. And we are at present in a limited way using the innovators to carry on extension activities by speaking to the other farmers. By that, other farmers are getting motivated and adopting new and innovative practices in their cultivation and also in terms of value addition and things on. The decentralization process was touched upon. It is already rolled on. I think it's time it goes to the sub-regional level, and all the 3 organizations work together to see that the decentralization is made use of by the countries where the projects are going on. With this, I stop, Madam. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patanayak, and thank you so much to all the candidates for the rich conversation and for answering all the questions in such record time. At this point, we're going to turn the floor to Danielle in Rome, who's going to give us an update on the Slido poll, as well as go through some of your questions from Slido. Danielle, the floor is over to you.
Thanks again, Okay, thanks Rumi again for this. It was and thanks to the candidate. It was a tough job, I must admit. And thanks everyone, the speakers who made so many comments and questions. I think the conversation, as you said, was extremely rich. We will now screen the results of the second poll on Slido. What are the most immediate food and nutrition security challenges for the next IFAD president? As you can see from the screen, there is a very vast majority of people who voted for the, let's say, contingency problem. So the need to increase the food system's resilience to external shocks, food prices or climate change, with 72% of the votes submitted to Slido. And the second position is held by the need to have agricultural land for planetary health, with the need to diversify sustainable agricultural production to support biodiversity and climate resilience and enhance regional food and nutrition security for health of humans and ecosystems. Again, I'm very grateful for all the candidates for their speeches and for being with us, and to the public. We connected the whole world with different time zones, and I'm very proud of this. As organizing team, I would now like to give the floor to Fabrizio, but again, Rumbi, thanks so much for helping us in this, and thank you to the candidates. It was not easy. Good luck for the next 2 weeks, and now I'm giving the floor to our hosting organization, both digitally and physically hosting us today, the Istituto Affari Internazionali. Fabrizio, the floor is yours for concluding the meeting.
Yeah, just quick final remarks. On behalf of Istituto Affari Internazionali, that is hosting here in Rome the event, and cooperated with the European think tank group and Southern Voice Network in the organization of this Open Consultation Forum 2022. Let me express our gratitude to the candidates, to the participating candidates, for their availability to virtually meet and also discuss with invited speakers and participants to this event. Thanks a lot also to Esther Penunia and Gerta Verburg for their inspiring opening speeches, to all the active participants to the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much, and to the audience for joining the event. Let me remind you that the recordings of the forum will be available very soon in the event page of the IAI website. The main findings of this forum will be summarized in a final policy paper with contribution to of all the researchers of the two organizing networks. Our main aim was ambitious. I think we at least partially created an opportunity for an exchange of view between the candidates and all the experts and stakeholders invited in Rome, and virtually. That is all now from Rome. Let's hope the best for the approaching special session of the Governing Council of IFAD, and especially to the next president. Have a nice day, and the forum ends here. Thanks.